Google hacking isn't actually hacking Google itself, but using Google, the search engine, and specifically crafted queries using their advanced operators to uncover information that would be interested to an attacker or a security researcher. Interesting thing about Google hacking is that phishers are really starting to use it. And through the refers of Apache logs, we can identify queries that we're using. This is pretty cool because we pop the query into Google, we see how they found the exploit host, and depending on the query, in this case it was an image view exploit that came out ago, we can, to a certain degree, predict which sites are going to infect, which sites have been infected, and we're seeing patterns that they're not trying very hard. Once they found their exploit, they're starting at the top of the list, and then they're just going down and infecting and infecting and infecting. So at the time of writing, and this was written about a month ago, there was about 1778 Google dorks, as we call them, on the iHackStuff forums. And in this example, we found 1,050 vulnerable hosts to this specific vulnerability, and a whole lot of phishing in terms of return on investment, one query. That's 1,000 different sites that we have to, as researchers, find ways to take down legally. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about scam kits. A scam kit is the actual phish itself. Typically, they're written in PHP or, in very rare cases, CGI or ASP, but they are designed to look exactly like the institution or the entity that phishers are trying to replicate. They are the meat and potatoes of the phish, so to speak. They are traded on internet relay chat, or they are passed around personally. They're generally pretty trivial. Save the page, change the image links, add in a little function to email the data that you've recorded and send it off away to a disposable email account. They generally don't take much skill, save for an entry-level day one PHP course. But they're not always exactly the same. And in fact, sometimes you can infer characteristics of the phishing group that's using them based on heuristics, based on type of comments or the specific way that they phrase the PHP. You can sort of identify trends in different groups, and you create a profile of these people, and then as we're starting to see more fish come across, we recover the data, then we could say, okay, these are the Indonesians that like to go after this giant bank in America, and this is where they're sending it. They like to use Gmail accounts, and oftentimes, believe it or not, kind of just reviewed this, they reuse the email addresses in the blind drops because, well, they're lazy, generally unskilled, or just don't care. They just feel so untouchable that they don't mind reusing them. These are ready-to-go kits, just add water. This is an example of a PHP processing engine. It's, what is that, 10 lines of PHP code. It's not exactly elite, but it gets the job done. So don't be a noob. Now, this is a little message. This is kind of a conflict of interest, but I spend hour after hour after hour at work looking at these scam kits, and it gets kind of boring. Googling these email addresses that people are using, we're finding some pretty ridiculous things. Namely, that they're reusing personal email addresses or handles, not just on the phishing sites themselves, but on hacker forums where they're talking about their phishing exploits, and maybe they let personal information slip about themselves, such as this particular individual is a phisher that was so damn proud of his DeviantArt page that he put a screenshot of his desktop using his hacker handle, using the email address fish from, thinking that he was untouchable because he wasn't in the United States. And for whatever reason, I don't understand it. I'm not that big of a desktop geek. I've never taken a screenshot and posted it on a blog. We zoom in a little bit, and we see quite a bit more interesting information, such as the IRC channels that he hangs out in, which files are in his home directory, which music he likes to listen to. I don't know if you can see that out there, but he's got Yahoo Buddy IM, including his name, his friends' names, who he's hanging out with. You can't really see because we've obscured most. There's quite a few exploits in the directory tree. And then that brings me on to my favorite really dumb thing that phishers do. Now, I'm not going to rant about MySpace. I'm sure people use it. I know it helps a lot of people hook up or whatever, but if you're going to rip somebody off, change at least a digit or something in your handle before you make your MySpace profile, because we've got these people that are posting their handle, posting pictures of themselves, which they went to, where they live, who they know, what they hang out with, their family, their co-conspirators, everything. They're dropping docs on themselves. And all this legalese stuff, I'm not really, I'm a researcher, so I'm going to hand it over to this guy. He tends to know a bit more about the law. So Lance, why don't you jump in here?
Or at least what they tell me the law is.
Yeah, or just lie about it.
Okay, yeah. So in the industry that we're in the investigational type thing that we're doing and all that fun, I whatever. Basically, the law that we usually have to abide and read about, make sure we're not doing anything illegal. And again, we always recommend you to call your AUSA or an attorney or whatever to make sure that you're not doing any law breaking here. But when all else fails, there's a section in Title 18 of USC 1030 that basically allows, if you're an ISP, is anybody here run or work with ISPs and stuff? Okay, so basically, in this case, it's always a good idea because law enforcement's doing what they can in this problem, with all due respect to that, but they have so many resources to tie to this, plus they have about 10 million pieces of paperwork before they can do one thing. And so with respect to that, a lot of investigators such as our company and other companies out there could actually assist ISPs in kind of what we call fish-proofing your ISP, because the source of the problem is at the ISP layer. When you do takedowns all day, you're calling up ISPs. So if you're a telephone service provider, ISP, it's recommended that you write a terms of service that people basically agree to before they come onto your ISP. That basically states, if you're going to commit any acts of illegal acts on our network, we are going to monitor you. We have the right to monitor you. And just consult your lawyer; they'll be able to put it together for you. The point is that it allows you to do fraud monitoring on your networks. Now, the same rule applies with IDS. What this means is, like, there was a law in California where even though it's your own corporation and you're providing IDS to your company, it's a highly recommended thing to give your employees basically a thing saying, hey, part of your employment, realize that your computer may be monitored, your networks are being monitored, things like this, because there's what they call an assumption of privacy law. It's a civil law, but no one likes getting sued either. So this is kind of also great for civilians. It's kind of like a Title III, which is like, I wouldn't say over wiretap anything. We're not, with being an ISP, you do need to make sure that you control what you are monitoring and you're not just monitoring everybody's information. But when you do want to track down these guys and you want to see what they're up to, or you want to set up a cPanel honey day, or whatever the newest exploit they're breaking into to find this stuff, it's kind of like a Title III for civilians, and it allows ISPs and us, or researchers, to come along and say, hey, can we get a copy of that hard drive when we don't need a subpoena? And the rule is you can't be directed by law enforcement to do this, or you do have to have a subpoena. But if you're doing it on your own volition and say, hey, I'm ISP, I'd like to get a hard drive copy if you can, so that we can analyze this and see what's going on. With that terms of service, that means they're allowed to do that and allowed to monitor it. Without a terms of service, it's considered a federal violation and considered basically an illegal wiretap. So this is handy. What it does for a lot of researchers and ISPs alone is it enables those partnerships with researchers and security gurus or whatever and ISPs. This enables strong intelligence. You can build up profiles. What we do, a lot of inference-based. We found some different fishing groups, like the rock fishing group, that we actually got what their mothership is basically, or their base camp, because they were using bots to basically front, like a firewall, the actual real site that was stealing all this data. So we worked with an ISP, we got a hard drive, we analyzed it, and we found like all the code, how many members in the group, what their nicknames are, and then we used it on future phishing attacks that we saw, and we would just go in and go /DNS/main.php, and it would give us the whole thing. We'd be able to take down their we could control their DNS, we can get all their names, we know what time it is, and we know where the next mothership is, because it says it all up in their mothership control panel, basically. So Title 18 is really focused on this rule. Basically, you're allowed to defend your network. You just have to let your customers know that they have to agree that it's okay for you to monitor them in that sense. And as I said earlier, IDS falls under this law. I'm going to give it back to Josh on this, because this is his little big project.
Sorry. So we've seen all this data. We've identified patterns. We understand the modus operandi of phishers, and at this point, now we're ready to get a little bit more aggressive. And so, not that aggressive. So Secure Science has been partnered with a research company based on the East Coast called Mayhamic Labs, and we've been working together to develop some new technology. One of our new products, it'll be open source, so that you'll be able to download it once the bugs have been polished out of it, is called ScamScan. It is essentially NIC2 for phishing. You run it against a site, and what it does is it goes through every possible combination of Wells Fargo known phishing scam kit names, or it looks for PHP-based backdoors, or botnet configuration files, checks for open directories, traverses the web structure, things like that. And it allows you to, within 10 seconds, just hit a button and get a nice little outputted report of, okay, what's probably the most likely way that we're going to be able to determine who's actually running this kit. Future concepts of this are integrated into another product that we're working on, which is called Wallfly. Wallfly is actually a botnet itself. What Wallfly's purpose is to monitor other botnets, but to provide a certain level of anonymity and safety to the researcher or the investigator monitoring the groups. So it's essentially just a Perl script that is an IRC daemon in and of itself, launches child processes which then connect back to itself into the centralized command and control server, and then you can issue botnet-style commands. It bears a striking resemblance to the commands that phishers themselves are using in their botnets to monitor them. Now, one thing that's nice about this is since it's written in Perl, it's very lightweight, it's portable. You can rent a host somewhere and throw it on there and have a relative anonymity. However, if you don't want to spend the money on a host, it's also very Tor-friendly, so a good majority of the IRC clients, or excuse me, servers out there will allow you to get to use Tor, and in that way we can provide another abstraction layer between us and the phishers, so that should they bust out their super leak rad udp.perl, we don't have to worry about it too much as researchers. And then another technology that we're working on is called Recon by Fire, and you can download this right now at mayhemiclabs.com. It is a CTCP shotgun, so to speak. You enter in the server, the channel name, and then a wildcard string of usernames that you want to look up. And what it does is it goes through every possible CTCP command and just fires at them at every person in the room to get information such as the IRC client version, which more often than not, if it is a bot or if it's masquerading as someone, or you can identify trends. Maybe every IP address in that room is on the same subnet, so maybe we can let the ISP know that they've got a big problem because every one of them in their class has been compromised. And so another thing that phishers are using is what's called a C99 PHP shell, which is, you know, like a generic PHP command pass-through, except it's got a lot of built-in functions such as PHP reverse connect so that you can have a shell like we showed earlier, or just use a password if you're going to do that, guys. Come on. And then there's the R57 one. A quick note about the R57 command shell. It was recently noted that on top of being used to root boxes, it also phoned home to the R57 crew, so that every time you own a box or a phisher owns a box with that command, with a PHP script, then the Russians who wrote it also have access to that site. So sites are finding themselves owned continuously instead of just one cockroach. There's several hundred. And I'm going to go ahead and plug Lance's book for him so he can be humble here. Phishing Exposed came out last year. What was it? Yeah. October? Yeah. December? Yeah, thereabouts. It's pretty good. If you're interested in more about what we've got to say, you did a great job, and highly recommend it. So we're getting the note for time. Does anybody have any questions? We've got some swag, some T-shirts to give out for the good questions. Yeah, you in the back?
Yeah, back to the Title 18, does that also apply to web companies that do like PCs?
What was the last part of that sentence?
Title 18, does that apply to like web monitoring and companies that like do monitor computers and web access?
Yeah, it's like HoneyNets kind of fall under that, any kind of web monitoring, any kind of passive monitoring that customers may be involved in. If there's any kind of privy information and any possible like confidential information, you can't just monitor anything. But in that sense, you check your law books on this and, kind of consult lawyers and stuff. I'm not a lawyer. But I would believe that depending on the situation, Title 18 could fall under that for fraud monitoring specifically. Go ahead. I'm very familiar, and I'm really familiar with who Gotti is. Him and I are not friends. I have my own list. It's called Malware, and I'm involved in a lot of different lists. Yes.